What happens when an artist tries to make a masterpiece without leaving the crowd behind? Virginia Woolf once threatened to stab anyone who called her middlebrow. For nearly a century, the word has survived as a polite insult to dismiss a clumsy compromise between high art and cheap entertainment. But a piece published in Psyche on 3 August 2026 flips that assumption. The question here is why critics are so quick to punish work that tries to be both artistically ambitious and wildly popular. Rather than a failure of taste, aiming for the middle might actually be the hardest creative tightrope to walk. Written by Aaron Meskin and Jonathan Weinberg in Psyche, narrated for Ava. If any human being, man, woman, dog, cat, or half-crushed worm, Virginia Woolf once wrote, dares call me middlebrow, I will take my pen and stab him, dead. With this, in an unsent letter to the New Statesman in 1932, she set the high, and highbrow, standard of contempt for the category. While the decades since have seen titanic growth in middlebrow art across all media, there has been little change in this default impression of middlebrow as a term somewhere between a literary expression of dismissal and an outright slur. Although the lowbrow has in recent years been reclaimed as a legitimate aesthetic domain, the middlebrow continues to be a denigrated and troublesome category. The highbrow has its defenders, snobs, and the lowbrow its defenders, hipsters, but it is not easy to find defenders of the middlebrow. We thus come not to bury the middlebrow, but to praise it. Middlebrow is a term of appraisal that admits not just of bad, but good, even brilliant instances. To do so, however, we must first take up the question of what the middlebrow is. Woolf herself acknowledged that determining this is no easy question to answer, which is unsurprising since the term is so contested and fraught. The middlebrow, we propose, should be treated explanatorily. We will identify a range of phenomena associated with the category, then hypothesize what best explains them. There are 4 features associated with the middlebrow. The first and most obvious is that the middlebrow is in the middle, juxtaposed between something low and something high. Woolf emphasized the category as betwixt and between, setting up a jab at what she saw as the hopelessly middlebrow BBC, the Betwixt and Between Company.
The mid-century cultural critic Dwight MacDonald says something similar about mid-cult, his term for the middlebrow, in his essay Mass Cult and Mid-Cult, 1960. In these more advanced times, the danger to high culture is not so much from mass cult as from a peculiar hybrid bred from the latter's unnatural intercourse with the former. A whole middle culture has come into existence, and it threatens to absorb both its parents. This intermediate form, let us call it mid-cult, has the essential qualities of mass cult: the formula, the built-in reaction, the lack of any standard except popularity, but it decently covers them with a cultural fig leaf. We agree with these anti-mids that the middlebrow should be seen as combining distinct elements that are not typically found together in either the highbrow or lowbrow, though we frame it rather differently. Nonetheless, the middlebrow is in the middle. John Updike's Rabbit series and Woody Allen's Crimes and Misdemeanors clearly fall into the middlebrow category. Second, it's clear that the term middlebrow has a generally pejorative status. It is often used as a way of criticising or dismissing a work of art, an artist or a viewer's tastes, and it's rare for someone to embrace the term for their own work or tastes. But that status is only a default. It's possible to cancel the negative implication of the term, as we hope to do here. Third, the contested nature of the category is itself a key feature that needs to be explained. That is, the boundaries of the category are profoundly unclear, such that fully informed and discerning audiences may differ as to whether something, a work or even an entire genre, such as classical Hollywood cinema, is middlebrow or not.
Finally, we do have a smallish set of obvious cases that informs our theorising. John Updike's novel tetralogy, Rabbit, 1960-90,
and Woody Allen's film Crimes and Misdemeanors, 1989, clearly fall into the middlebrow category, while Arnold Schoenberg's atonal melodrama Pierrot Lunaire, 1912, William Faulkner's novel The Sound and the Fury, 1929, a Minecraft movie, 2025, and Sabrina Carpenter's song Espresso, 2024, clearly fall outside of it, to either side. Any plausible theory of the middlebrow either has to confirm these widely shared judgments or offer an explanation as to why they are misguided. Critics like Woolf and MacDonald tried to identify the middlebrow as stranded in a kind of no artist's land between two mutually inconsistent areas of legitimate artistic creation: the intellectually challenging and artistically creative realm of high art, made by and for elites, and the energetically sincere and robustiously vital fields of low art, made by and for the masses. For them, the middlebrow is half high and half low, a misbegotten mule, stuck in the middle, too dumbed down to be serious art, but lacking the authenticity and vivacity of great popular art. The paradigm middlebrow works are aimed at a mass audience while demonstrating high art aspirations. We disagree. Instead of a neither-nor view, we propose a both-and approach. Middlebrow works are those that simultaneously pursue disparate standards of success for both high and low art. Unlike the avant-garde, which may appear only to a rarefied audience, middlebrow works pursue a broad audience, requiring only a minimal acquaintance with the medium or genre.
And unlike most straightforwardly pop works, which can reach a mass audience by being weightlessly undemanding, middlebrow works aspire to at least some forms of artistic achievement typical of high art, such as thematic depth, formal ambition, intricate narrative structure, philosophical richness, linguistic inventiveness, and so on. In short, our theory is as follows. Middlebrow works of art are works that, to a significant degree, both aim to be accessible to a mass audience and possess substantial high art ambitions. The middleness of this brow is explained by its possession of the characteristic goals of both the low and the high. The paradigm middlebrow works are aimed at a mass audience while demonstrating such high art aspirations as a sustained examination and critique of American decline, in the case of Updike, or tackling the existential question of how we ought to live and treat each other if there is no theological guarantor of morality, in the case of Allen. Paradigm non-mid works either do not try to make themselves accessible to a broad audience, e.g. Schoenberg or Faulkner, or are not weighted down with grandiose ambitions, e.g. Minecraft movie or Carpenter. What about the contestedness of the term's application? The two main components of our theory are a matter of degree, both in terms of how broad or narrow an audience the work is seeking, and in terms of just how artistically ambitious it aims to be. Gradability begets vagueness, and this is what we find in the domain of the middlebrow.
Eric Carmen was somewhat ambitious when he ripped off Sergei Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 for his single All By Myself, 1975, but to such shallow ends that it is tempting to treat it as a slightly gussied-up pop hit rather than an authentic middlebrow work. Perhaps something similar should be said about Progol Harem's use of J.S. Bach's Air on the G-string in A Whiter Shade of Pale, 1967, as well as the allegedly accidental reference to The Miller's Tale by Geoffrey Chaucer. Styx's allegorical album The Grand Illusion, 1977, named after Jean Renoir's cinematic masterpiece from 1937, is a difficult case, ambitious to some extent, and certainly aimed at a broad audience, but also pompous and unintentionally silly. It is not clear whether it is properly classified as middlebrow or just somewhat pretentious mass art. While much of David Lynch's work is unquestionably avant-garde and indifferent to the matter of accessibility, there are also examples of his work, such as the film Blue Velvet, 1986, and the TV series Twin Peaks, 1990-91, designed to be appreciated by a broader audience, while retaining surrealist elements and symbolism characteristic of high art. Perhaps the more popular side of Lynch's oeuvre falls into the middlebrow category. People notice the middlebrowness of failed middlebrow works more than of the successful ones. In addition to degrees of accessibility and ambition, our theory allows for contestation of what sorts of ambition are properly understood as high art in the first place. Are the high production values and political themes of the Star Wars spin-off Andor 2022-25 evidence of the kinds of ambition that would make it count as middlebrow, or is it just very well-made popular art?
Our theory makes sense of the possibility of reasonable dispute here. What about The Pit 2025? On the one hand, it is a fairly traditional medical procedural, but its use of documentary style, as well as its ambitious narrative structure, might be thought to push it towards the middlebrow. We do not look to rule on such border cases, but rather count it as a mark in favour of our theory that it tracks these penumbras well. Why is middlebrow generally a term of artistic opprobrium? Because it is a both-and category, whose two components can pull in distinct, even opposed directions. The middlebrow artist is pursuing lofty artistic goals, and the higher that goal, the more they may wish to reach for all sorts of different artistic devices. Yet, in order to pursue mass accessibility, they may need to radically delimit the choices to those that the wider public can make sense of. A work's middlebrowness is most visible when this essential tension fails to be reconciled. Consider the classic middlebrow failure mode of sentimentality. Indulging in unearned but crowd-pleasing emotional content can create an affective illusion of depth. A wider audience may balk at demanding plots, preferring more saccharine developments and artistically inappropriate happy endings. Another commonly noticed failure mode is pretentiousness, a flaw rooted in a mismatch between an artwork's ambitions and its actual achievements. Realising high art ambitions, after all, is exacting, so it is often tempting to construct the mere appearance of value or significance instead. In contrast, lowbrow works typically lack highfalutin ambitions. And while some unsuccessful highbrow works get critiqued as pretentious, in general, large-scale ambitions are not seen as inappropriate to works of this sort. That is, such a work is seen as failing to meet a standard that it, in principle, could have met, while a middlebrow work so tagged is seen as being too big for its britches. So, if people notice the middlebrowness of failed middlebrow works more than that of the successful ones, then the term will have an aura of condemnation. Yet it also follows that good, even outstanding middlebrow art is a real possibility. Francis Ford Coppola's film Apocalypse Now, 1979, is wildly ambitious, but it realised those ambitions while yielding big box office profits. Our paragon of the brilliant middlebrow is Stephen Sondheim, of whom the philosopher Cornel West exclaimed, "His genius shall live forever." His ambitions included writing a musical entirely about presidential assassins, or composing a score inspired by Georges Seurat's pointillism, or adapting a plot from an Ingmar Bergman film. But Sondheim's musicals are frequently revived or adapted for mass-market movies such as Sweeney Todd 2007 and Into the Woods 2014. That this inherent tension in middlebrow may often be difficult to manage is no reason to think it can never be done, and all the more reason for deep admiration for the artists who pull it off. So being middlebrow is not a way for a work of art to be bad, but a way for it to operate under a particular kind of challenge, achieving artistic accomplishments without losing a mass audience. Highbrow complainers do have a legitimate artistic fetch about some middlebrow art, namely those works that fail to rise to that challenge. But for them to reject the category on the whole betrays confusion.
Perhaps they mistakenly suppose that only the greatest art is worth consuming, or perhaps they retain some aesthetic puritanism, the sense that works with great artistic value cannot also be fun. If you are a master of combining high and low arts like the great John Waters, then you can get away with saying, as he does, "My influences were always high and low, and never in the middle, and I still have trouble with the middle." Otherwise, any would-be neo-Woolfians should consider their own arguments closely, and be sure their convictions really are ones they want to hold to.